There you go.
Yay. Okay. So I'm Janelle. I also go by Jay. I use they, them pronouns. I am a writer, composer, lyricist, director, choreographer, all of the things. But as I was saying, I'm really a storyteller. At the root of everything that I do, I think about music as telling a story. I think about lyrics as telling a story. I think about dialogue as telling a story. And so I think the easiest way to be like, I am a storyteller and I am here to give you more tools for telling stories in a musical. So this sheet is a cheat sheet. Refer back to it for like any sort of questions or things that I'm saying that you're like, I'm not really sure. And maybe we'll go back and use some of these links. So there's the book or the libretto, the librettist, and it's the person who writes the book or the text of the musical. There's the lyricist, is the person who writes the lyrics or writes the songs completely, you know, with a melody. And the composer is the person who writes the music. I also articulates the music because sometimes they just have the concept in their head and then they can like delineate, they can delegate out like, okay, I want it to sound like this, and then to a transcriber or a copyist, which are all, again, maybe more words. Yeah, thank you people who are coming in. Also, we're gonna come up with some ideas like from the beginning. So sample premise, every musical like can survive on this ground alone, which is like there's someone really passionate who has a really big goal and they have to go through these various situations to actually like get to their goal or get to their or complete their journey. The hero's journey, which I think is a common narrative that we use in like all writing, is very relative to musicals. It usually never fails. So I love thinking about work as a lyricist. So here are some examples of lyric form, AABA, and we'll come back to it. But also when you're trying to figure out what that means, you should just be able to click on it and then that actual link will take you to it. And then finally down here, and your song building worksheet is in this other worksheet that I'll give you in a moment. Down here is like a composer's secret dictionary. This will probably not be useful to you right now, but I think it would be useful if you decide that you're someone who wants to start like composing and thinking about composition in that way. And this is like my secret dictionary because I kind of feel like it's a cheat sheet. Like, are you thinking about your scales chromatically? Are you thinking about them diatonically? Are you thinking about just your major mode and your minor mode? Or are you thinking about like Lydian and Mixolydians, which I don't mention here, but you know, like, I think these are just great, like checklist questions to consider, not like I have to play these intervals, I have to play in these key signatures. Okay, does everyone have this sheet? I feel like maybe someone else came into the chat, into the room. So I'm gonna put it in the chat again, and then I'm gonna come at you with another thing in the chat. And this time, so for today, I really wanted us to kind of have a guided sheet already. So I made this little template and I want you to make a copy of it, you know, by going down File, make a copy. So I'm just giving you viewer access. And you don't have to share this with me if you don't want to, but this is going to be kind of your guide through for some of our exercises that we do. And I'll explain them when we get there, but I'm going to give you sharing access and give you a few moments.
Is this a poetry workshop today?
It's a musical theater workshop, but
oh, okay,
we definitely will hit some poetry. We can't not. When you think, I call it poetic lyrics, but
okay,
yeah,
wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I see all the anonymous animals. Cool beans. All right, so I'm gonna try to do not a lot of talking at you, but also holding space for questions and thoughts.
I do have a question right now, Jay.
Yeah.
It's a sort of like a technical one. The document that you're sharing with us, is it going to be, are we going to be able to save on our deck? How do we have access to that file after post our session?
Once you make a copy of it, it goes directly into your drive.
Okay, thanks.
Can I mention, Janelle, I just tried, it's not typable. I saved it, but I wasn't able to type on it.
Did you download it or did you open it?
Oh, I probably just opened it.
Well, let's take a look because it could be, we can look together. If we come here and we make the copy, it should tell you where you want to put it in your folders.
Okay.
And then when you open it, it should open like a Google Doc.
I'm clicking on file and it just won't take. All right.
You know, I can also download it as a docx and then see however that opens on your computer.
Okay, great.
Let's try that. It says file blocked for security reasons.
Ah, it's the DOE laptop.
Yeah, yeah. I just requested to you to open access to edit, which we'll see if that works.
But I don't want you to edit this one specifically because then everyone will have access to that one.
Oh, yeah, I wasn't edit this one. I was just thinking for future use,
Mm-hmm.
be able to get in there and work with it.
Yeah, I want you to be able to work with it today. I could also, let me try emailing you a copy. What's your email address?
Rosita Libre.
Libre?
Uh-huh. One word. Good, at yahoo.com.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And I see Gloria too.
Hi, Jay. May I send you my email as well?
Yeah.
Yes?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah.
So those are PDFs you're sending.
I'm actually going to send them as Word documents
okay,
so that you should be able to open them.
All right.
Yeah.
In the meantime, Janelle, I would tell you that I spent last year writing short stories with some women, and one was a screenwriter, and she told me that one of my short story could be adapted to the stage. And I was like, oh, that's exciting. So you never know, right?
You never know. I have this musical that has a workshop tomorrow, and everyone says that it's gonna it'll be a better movie musical. And I'm like, but that's the part that makes it like really exciting on stage, is that you're seeing it as a movie musical. And they're like, yeah, but then why don't we just make it a movie musical? And I'm like, no, you don't get it if you're asking.
And I like that you use In the Heights, because I didn't watch it when it first came out, but I watched it this year and I loved it. Well, I live in Washington, inward Washington Heights. So I spent half of the time trying to look at the locations, but I like the story and the songs. And I felt it resonate in me. So,
yeah. I was just saying, I have not seen the movie, but the musical was my first introduction to like obviously Lynn's work, outside of Working, that's where I really was introduced to Lynn's work, because he has a song in Working with like Stephen Schwartz and all of these other, like in Mickey Grant, who's incredible Black woman who writes her own book, or used to write her own book, music and lyrics. Has this beautiful show called Don't Bother Me, I Can't Cope, I think. Great. People are sending me back that they're having success opening it. So that feels good. Yeah, but that was, so the musical version of In the Heights is so dear to me, which is what I had up. I had like the original musical soundtrack up. I have not seen the movie version, and I feel like I'm okay. Okay, are we ready for me to talk a little bit at you and then we're gonna start exercises?
Sure.
Any more questions? Okay, cool. So I call this course Mapping Out Your Musical because you really are looking at a musical as like, these are the places that I have to go to get to this thing. And these are the tools that I need to have. At any given moment, you need to know the heart or the root or the theme of your story. You need that tool for every single part of this, of creating. And then also you need the tool of a musical message, some sort of like underlying musical theme too, that's supporting the heart. So on this sheet, I have us starting, and in this order, yay. And in this order, we're gonna start by thinking about the book, and we're gonna start really with our heart, so our idea. And then we're gonna move over to some lyrics. And I think that lyrics are actually the poetry of the book. And I'll talk more about that in a little bit. And then we're gonna end with the music. And I made three, I think. I've made 3 little tracks that we can set things to, but we'll talk more about that when we get there. Don't think too hard on it. So when you want to start thinking about your idea, you want to start by fully seeing it, right? Like sometimes an idea comes to us and we're just like, I want to see a story about a story about 2 moms living by the sea. I don't know why, that's just kind of where I'm at. That's beautiful. That's a great start. But then what else is happening? What sea? Why do they live there? Why do they live alone? Do they have children? Like all of that is where you start to fully build out your idea. And you need all of that from the beginning to start making an outline, right? Because then I can go, we start here, we end up in the middle of it, we're by the sea and there's a hurricane happening. And then by the end of it, we find out that they're actually lovers, you know, like I need that journey, and knowing my full idea helps me get there. So one thing that is super important that I always do, and there are so many unconventional ways and conventional ways to outline a show, I always outline a musical of mine. So I'm gonna show you what one of my outlines looks like. And I'm gonna also hold space for questions while I do that. Any questions so far?
I do. Is it this outline? Is it the skeleton from which we write our treatment? And do we use this? I am taking a screenwriting class, and we call it a treatment. Do we do the same for a musical? Do we write out a treatment?
You would definitely pitch a musical with a treatment. Sometimes I call them a deck, and I can show you an example of a musical deck as well. Make sure I do that when we remind me to show you an example of a musical deck when we finish.
Okay.
But you don't actually you don't have to start with that in this realm, because in musical realm, they're gonna want, if it's a musical, right? Like if it's a play, then you can use this information, this outline as your treatment, no problem. But if it's a musical, they need some sort of a guiding sound, some sort of addition to that. And you don't always have that right away. Like we're gonna work today in sort of a book, lyric, music order, but you don't always move that way. And you don't always feel great that way, right? You may find out halfway through your show that you actually don't want to be writing the music alone, and you want to collaborate on that. And then you have to recreate that relationship to the music and re-piece it back into your show. And so your treatment comes in a musical world, your treatment comes way later, because you need to have so many examples.
Oh, okay, awesome.
Okay, so I write in final draft. This is a musical of mine called Wet. And what you can do in final draft is you can write out beat boards. And so people who are working on screenplays, also this may feel familiar to you, but I really just set it up. This is act 1, scene 1, scene 2, and I'm just generically saying what happens in those moments. I'm filling out my idea. This is what I think, this is what is going on. Sometimes if there are lines that I'm like, oh, this has to be said here, I write it in here. It's like summarizing each. This is not the summary that I would give out also, to be clear, but it is like summarizing each scene here.
Fantastic. Awesome. This is a great guidance for my screenwriting as well, because that's what I thought I should do. So you are confirming to me that it's the right way to go about it.
Yeah. And there are other ways to go about outlining a musical. We'll kind of do a version of this today, but I recommended to a friend just like writing out the ideas in one lines that they wanted to see happen. And then underneath that idea, start building the scenes and starting like, this is the visual of what I want to happen. This is the emotional landscape of what I want to happen. I think there should be a song in here. Just like having those as like words as bullets underneath the scene, and then start building the scene there. And I find that helpful because I'm seeing everything grow, and I can always kind of refer back. Like, this was my original idea. I just wanted to see Jamie fall in love with Amy. And now I'm like, suddenly Jamie and Amy are in this deep entanglement. And I'm like, oh, wait, remember, remember where you came from. And so that one's super helpful because you have all those steps there. This one, I actually, I'm gonna show you. I still like to write things on paper. And I have this very old moleskin storyboard paper. And so this is actually a condensed version of what I write here when I'm first thinking out my whole idea. And this is a play, but like, as you can see, like for my musicals, I use all of the space, I kind of group them. I'm really just seeing kind of like a verbatim, this is what I think happens here. This is the actions for this, that's for action for that. Sometimes in this land, I'll put songs, but sometimes I won't. Sometimes I won't put songs until I get into the final draft land here, where my thoughts are a little more concise. And that's two different stages of like layering, right? There's my first verbatim free writing, and then there's when I want to condense it a bit to see how I then make these sort of dramatic moments move. Jasmine, you had your hand up.
Hi, nice to meet you, Janelle. I'm Jasmine Hina, and I'm normally a poet and a fiction writer. However, I write songs. I had training at Berkeley for songwriting, and that's why I'm interested in the building blocks of a musical, because I just kind of want to learn how it goes in terms of the order, in terms of when you're doing that writing and manuscript process. And also I know you just mentioned about different templates and what have you. So here my question is that I see that you're writing the different acts and scenes within boxes. Is there a particular standard in the industry if let's say you are submitting for publication for the musical or production, that you can maybe talk about in terms of, I know in terms of mapping or an outline, and then, in terms of the steps for preparation?
Yeah, I think what I'm hearing is that we want to look at a deck now. So I'm opening one up because that's really where, for a musical, that's really where you can get to sharing. So this is for my musical group therapy. This is our like show graphic on the background. A deck is usually specific. So this one is like a producer's deck.
Okay.
And then there's like a linkable table of contents, because it's thick, it's not, and people make these now. So this is from maybe 4 years ago. And now people make these as like videos. They're like, all this information is in a video. So there's so many ways to adapt this format. But basically you always make sure you name what your set requirements are, your orchestration needs, your design notes. I do a character breakdown in the front. And then I do a breakdown of the kind of concept of the whole musical. This
Okay.
one is a semi-immersive musical about group therapy. And so I kind of name what happens in the sessions. There are exercises that we do with the participants and with the witnesses. There's a participant agreement that goes out that's not legally binding, but just kind of like gives that feeling of like we are really entering into a space where people are about to share. I again kind of go through what you need even like prop wise for this show.
Okay.
And all of that is like the nitty gritty in the beginning. Then I kind of give some dangly pretty numbers about why this is again group therapy, some mental illness, about why this sort of topic is like relevant and important. I drop photos from residencies, and then I do the synopsis. These are like thick synopses,
Okay.
which are so different. Like I would not share my little boxes from my final draft because those are like, again, still naked thoughts. Now, after I've written the whole thing, I come back and I rethink about everything that goes on in that act. And then,
Yeah, so I have a question about length, Janelle, before you
Mhm.
go on to your next point. In terms of the synopsis length, how many deck I don't know, sheets would they be called? Would be, let's say, on average for, let's say, an emerging or first time musical writer, producer person.
I would say, speaking transparently, that I have actually too much going on. I would say 2 pages for 2 acts, one act on one page, and then the other act on the other page. I did do that, but you can see very obviously that I squeezed act 2 into that other page, and I really should have just like condensed a bit. So this is kind of a young emerging artist uh, pitfall, which is like over explaining. And
Okay, got it.
I would avoid over explaining now. I'd probably summarize this a little better because they don't really need to know every single beat that's happening, which is what I think this is written out as. And really they need to know like the overarch. What I did
The
here,
arc, you mean the
yeah,
arc of the musical?
yeah. And the arc of that act too. Like, yeah, they want to see the arc of the entire musical, but when you break up acts, you just want to see the arc of this act and then the arc of that act. I named every song and described every song in this, so that's also why. Like every song that happens in act 1, I gave you the like information about it. So that took up a lot of space.
Wow.
Yeah.
So part of the transcript or manuscript, within each act, not only are you including, the voices of the actors and the play, the play itself, but you include the songs that go with each act within the manuscript. Is that correct?
Yeah, you
On the
try to
deck?
do a version of that.
I beg your pardon? I'm sorry.
Yeah, try to do a version of that, especially because later, like I'll do a libretto sample. A libretto is the book, so you see that it's just the dialogue. And then I'll do a libretto sample that shows what the lyrics look like inside of it. Then I do a score sample.
Okay. Wow. Wow.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like musical decks or treatments are usually not made in the beginning because you need all of these parts, right? Proof of concept, proof of like playability, all of those things are really important when people are trying to find a show to produce or trying to produce a show. But the other reason why I name the songs in my summary is because down here, I do a materials page for music samples. And I want them to really be able to like, okay, crazy. What did they say crazy was attached to up there? So that they have context when they're listening to it.
Okay.
And I bet there's an easier way to do that as well, that I did not know at this time. And then there's a creator page, right? Like this is baby me.
Oh, that's such an amazing photo of you.
Thank you.
Sorry, I
You
just
look
I just had
great. I love that.
Thank you. I was like maybe in my early 20s.
That's
Oh,
fantastic.
sexy.
I
Right?
know it, right?
Um,
You still look good.
thank you. Thank you.
That's wonderful that, you knew, that this was, your gift at a young age, you know what I mean? Because, they
Yeah,
try to beat that out of us when we're little, is our creativity.
for sure. I actually started my junior year of college, my sophomore year, summer of my sophomore year of college. I started a nonprofit musical theater company because I had done like an off-Broadway show, and I just felt like there were so many expectations of like people of color and also like people coming from from colleges, and I felt like a lot of them were unrealistic. And so I made this company to kind of bridge that gap. And then I had to write a musical because I immediately found out how expensive buying the rights of musicals were. So it really
Okay.
came out of like this pressurized situation. And I had already written a short musical. I like tried to get out of writing a final for my survey of Western music class in college. And instead I wrote a short musical about studying for the final and thought that that would get me out of the final. And my teacher was just like, this is really cool. See you in the final tomorrow. And I was just like, oh, I didn't study. That was hard. So I had already dabbled in sort of pressurized show making. That Subliminal, which is the first one that I usually mention, was the first musical that I made because I needed to have, I had all these actors, these young performers, and I needed material for them to do. And I think I wrote Subliminal when I was 20, because I remember everyone went out for drinks after the show and I could not go. And they were like, you don't have a fake? And I was just like, why would I get a fake? I'm like 1 year away from just being able to go. But I have been writing musicals for a while. And it really came from writing stories. Roberto.
Yes, I just like to going back to Jasmine's question. Is it so? What is the ideal size of a deck? Like, is it you're presenting us with a 20 pages deck? Is this the standard, or did I understand that this is a little bit expanded version of your detailed version?
This is definitely a detailed version. This is a producer's deck, so it has to include stuff like what a budget looks like for this show, sort of the history of this show and where it performed. But if I was just doing like a deck for a composer, for like another collaborator, I wouldn't have all of this information in it. And I do still think like I could probably link more, right? Like I could show a smaller version of the projected budget and link it to a sheet that someone could look at that with more details, because this isn't really clear. I probably don't need to show a full song worth of the score sample, which I think I don't do, but I still show like 4 pages. Why when I can just show like 2? I stand by that my summaries are still a little too long, or my synopsis is a little too long. And I think I have 2 versions of dangly food, like Pretty Things Dangled, this breakdown of session and these quick stats on mental illness really early on. And I think maybe I would now think of condensing it or maybe putting them together, right? Like why?
So when you mean this is a producer deck, you mean that you as a producer have prepared this material to present to, let's say, a potential investor?
No, this is what me as the creator presents to a producer to take it on. And
Okay.
then they can use versions of this, but also they'll have way more access to things once your producer takes it on to then pitch it to investors.
So Janelle,
Okay.
I know there's some folks here who are way ahead of others,
Mhm.
but we start from the beginning. How do you prepare a musical?
Yes.
What's the idea behind it? You know, step by step, how do you prepare one, set it up, ready to pitch?
Yeah. All right, so let's keep going in this space, the idea. So using that doc that I sent you, I want you to write an idea that you've had for a musical. Things that I really think are important to remember are that musicals usually start by dropping you in a world. So everything's already established. You spend very little time trying to do all of this exposition to get into it. There's always high action, moving from scene to scene or moment to moment. We can call them moments for now. And that there is a resolution. Whether we like that resolution is, up in the air, but there is some sort of resolution that happens. Things that I want you to think about in this 5 minutes that you're gonna do to make your idea is to give people names. They could be terrible names. They could be John, Jacob, Jingleheimer, Smith, but give them names now so that as you start building up a profile of this person, you can really attach things. So if you are having a hard time thinking about like an idea, you can think of a fable or a childhood story or a myth, write that out, and then make those and use that as the material that you can make a musical about. Another tip I have is to begin with we arrived at. So really like this is the height of the thing that we are entering in right now. And then shift to there was this building tension. What is driving the show going? And conclude with something finally happened. So that if you're looking for some prompts, you can use that as like a really setup for some prompts. And then my helpful hint or tip number 3 is that think of a musical that you've liked, that you've seen and that you like. And then if you could change one thing about that musical, what would it be? And then write that whole idea. Before I start the timer, do we have any questions?
Janelle, when you said the second prompt, you said, what is the tension? Can you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, when I talk about the tension in a musical or a theatrical piece, I talk about where the climax is leading us to. Because in order to get up that peak, up that hill to the climax, we really do need to feel things getting tighter and tighter. We need to be pushed into that space. We're not just going to willingly go up it in musicals because there's so much fantasticism, which is not a word, but I'm making it a word, because you're really like heightening every moment. To break out in song, you are really like having a heightened feeling, a heightened experience. And so to have that sort of through line, there does need to be a tension that continues to go to feed that. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Any other questions? All right, I'm gonna start this timer. If you finish before the timer is done, feel free to just drop in the chat that you're done. write in the chat if you're done, or if you feel like you need more time. 5 minutes is kind of a pressurized space intentionally, though. All right, that's our timer. Write to me in the chat if you feel like you've got a good enough chunk of your idea down. Thank you, Lila. Okay, thank you, Jordan. I think I'm gonna wait for one more person to tell me they feel good. Okay, thanks, Jasmine. Hold on to it. If you have extra time and some of the other exercises, you can go back, but I really don't think you should. Like, keep moving forward for today, keep progressing. Things will come and that's great, but don't worry about it. Don't worry about having to go back. Go back if you feel moved to. So now I want us to veer, we have this idea, right? We have this concept, it's outlined or it's detailed as best as we can. The one thing that we need to do in every single musical is make sure we're making real conversation. Sometimes we make generic conversation like, hi, how are you? I'm fine, how are you? And in musical world, that does not play unless it's musicalized and it's awkward. Like there's something, there needs to be some sort of a catch, right? So we need to have real conversations and then heighten them. Ways to have real conversations are one, thinking about authenticity. Starting with an authentic character gives you a head start in making real dialogue because you're going to hear that person's tone, their intentions, their inflections. You're going to pick up on all of those things. So maybe pick a person who you already know or that reminds you of a character in your piece. Avoid overqualifying. I feel like this is not a great example, but I say, your friend that overshares is not aware of the damage they do, and neither should your character. So when I'm just venting to my friend, I can't be super, though sometimes I am, I can't be super aware that like I am laying all of these things down on a person because it would take away from the way that I'm just like trying to get off these things off my chest, right? So I don't want to overqualify myself, my characters either, right? Like they need to kind of struggle. They need to, and that helps with that tension, right? Like if this character is just laying stuff out, it's building tension because they're not listening to their other person or they're not taking in the other person in the space. Another thing that helps for making real conversation is making something time sensitive. Why is it happening now? Why didn't it happen before the audience was dropped in? And then I said, keep it on timing. Like make it topical, make it urgent in that moment, make it aligned to where it needed to go, and then avoid false urgency. And this is sort of called like a Chekhov's rule in theater, and it works here too. Don't set up a gun in the first act if it's never going to go off, or do, but make sure everyone talks about how that gun did not go off, right? Like, don't give us something that makes it kind of urgent and then be like, it wasn't really urgent, it didn't matter, without like having an intention behind that. And then finally, when I think about making real conversation in a musical, I think about something that's familiar. I think of a conversation that I overheard. I think of something that was intense and personal that maybe I experienced, or maybe that I shouldn't have experienced. And then I try to recall that conversation and write it. And I don't write anything with anyone's particular real name. It's like too familiar. I'm working on a screenplay right now, and everyone has their real name except for the character in the screenplay that is me. And my director was like, why? And I was like, because I needed a slight degree of separation to actually fully make these people who they were in those moments. And I am too much who I am now to make a me that was before that time. I need to make a different person that is me at that time. I said a lot. Questions?
I can say, I love what you say, like, don't, well, I can't quote it well, but it was so good about the gun. Don't, so when do you know though, like, it's too soon, or it's too late to introduce this? You know what I mean? Because sometimes I feel like that's something that I struggle a little bit with.
I think if I know that I want to have a gun, this is just to stay in this metaphor, in my show, I put that as one of my, like, this has to be an Easter egg. There needs to be a version of this that is a seed that is planted somewhere and that grows. And where that seed gets planted depends on how much or how important I want that gun to be, right? Or that whatever that fruit is to be. So if I'm planting it in the beginning, then I'm really like, by the end of Act 1, that's really when the gun would go off, because that seed has had that much time to grow. If my seed takes too long to grow, right? Like if I put it in Act 1 and then we're like in the middle of Act 2 and it's just starting to sprout, I've probably lost the audience has probably lost interest in it too, because they want to pick up on the seed. They want to feel that, like, oh, I'm in there, I have a layer. And when you don't let it move fast enough for their engagement, they're like, I think I just learned a thing for no reason, or I like hyper focused on this one thing and it didn't even mean anything. And it takes away from the full experience of taking in a show. Any other questions? Did I answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, you know, like I feel like you gave me a very specific answer, which I appreciate. For example, like, you know, like at the beginning of the act, you know, if it depends on how significant the information is. Yes, you did to me. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And everything I say is a rule that can be broken, but everything you break, you have to break it with intention. Like, because musical theater is such a formed medium, when you want to break that form, you really like I was saying earlier, I'm trying to break the form of, like, we just break out in song and dance for one of my musicals. And it takes a lot of, people are giving me a lot of pushback. They're like, this is more for screen. This is like a cinematic, like a movie musical, because I'm changing a form. And so I have to be really sure about what I wanted that form to change and why. My why has to be really driven when I'm going to work against the form. Just as like a heads up, but like, go for it because it's fun. Like, I find it really fun when I have an idea that's outside of the form, but I also feel really familiar with what the form is, so I know when people are pushing back what I really need to like say or adjust to get to where I need to get for them to understand me. So it's taken me 9 years. Yeah.
Yeah. So know the rules before you even break them.
Know them, yeah. And that doesn't mean you have to like, and that's why these are small little prompts so that you're following the rules and then break them. Now that you've done it once, you'll know how to break it. So we're gonna go to part 2, and I want you to use those 3 tools that we just saw from before. So that's authenticity, that's time sensitive, and that's familiar, to make a moment, dialogue for a moment in your idea, right? So a moment is like Susie finds out the cat is dying. What's familiar? Do I know anybody else who's experienced their cat dying and them finding it out? What makes it time sensitive? Do they only have 20 minutes left with their cat before it dies? What makes it authentic? Why did they have this cat? How much did they love this cat? Was this cat like a child to them? All of those things, I'm going to take just my one moment that I made in my idea and make it into dialogue. Don't worry if you don't know the music of this moment, because it's just dialogue right now. Just think about the details. What happens? Feel extra encouraged to genuinely paint out a picture, to be like, we walk into the room and the phone is already ringing and the veterinarian calls on the other line and asks me to sit down first. Feel free to be very detailed right now and also be really intentional in your dialogue. A moment can be a scene, so we can transition if we're ready to be like, this is a scene that we're looking at. But what we want to hold on to is that it's something tied to the idea and it's threaded through the whole musical. So keep it intentional. Why do we need to see this moment? What does the audience get from this moment? Use real conversation as a tool, but it's not the only tool. I build conversations in my head all the time. Just because I'm like planning what people are going to say to me, I'm like trying to predict all the trauma that I could ever experience to protect myself from it. So my imagination is constantly building dialogue. Use some of that dialogue that you're like, oh, that shit was rational. Okay, I'll take that. Some of them are like really crazy and you can take those too because it's musical theater, but try to maybe right for now, find a rational one that you're like, I could agree with that and put it there if you don't want to use a real conversation. Also, you can write a dream scene, right? So something that you dreamed where you only see these certain parts and usually a dream has a theme, that counts too as anything you can write in this dialogue. And this is on the part of the sheet that says like A, B. So you can take out A and put character names, and then where text is aligned, I just wanted you to start to see how dialogue is set up in a musical, where the character name is centered, but the text is aligned to the left. Questions? Any? All right, I'm gonna set our timer. You have 8 minutes. If you finish before 8 minutes, you're welcome to come back and let me know. About 4.5 minutes left. About 1 minute. Time. Okay, so I wrote in the chat, but I just said it's okay if you're not done, like if you haven't hit all the points that you wanted to hit in this scene or in this moment, because you can always go back. But we're just trying to get the feeling and the muscle of like, this is what it's like to write dialogue. maybe it's great right now, maybe it's not great, but it'll get great because you now know the muscle of how to get into it, or a muscle, because there are so many other ways to get into it. So now you'll understand or hear me talk a bit about why I call lyric writing poetic. Poetry is beautiful. It invokes sensation. It is detailed. It is expressive. It is allowed to be in short form, long form, phrase, syllabic. Syllabic. The syllables get to like play off of each other. So all of that is are all of the same tools that go into building lyrics. I want to be playing with syllables. I want to be playing with metaphor. I want to play with a little bit of time, rhythm changing. I want to delay an experience with the lyric so that it can fully land when it comes in later. So that's the poetry behind a lyric. And then the justice, why I call this poetic justice, is that I have to justify why I'm being so darn artsy and so high emotioned that I am singing in a moment where maybe there wasn't singing before, right? Unless it's an opera where the whole show is entirely sung. In a musical, you have to really justify why suddenly you need to be singing. And it's usually like, I'm maximized my emotions. I've maximized the amount of feelings that I could have right now. I have felt something very traumatic or extreme. And those are my those are the two parameters in my world of building a good lyric, is that it is poetic with an appropriate balance, and then it also justifies why we're going into song. Any questions about that concept? No?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah.
So, because when it's good that you transitioned to building a song, because I felt the urge to write it in like a song or poetic form when I was doing the dialogue. And so when do you know when that break happens? When you're writing the dialogue between the two characters or three or whatever it's going on, or one whatever it is, character one or two or whatever in a scene, and how do you go from there to transitioning into the song? Do you like insert it in, or what is usually have you seen from your experience the protocol?
The protocol is so different depending on your collaborative process. Are you the book writer, the lyricist, and the composer, which sometimes, most of the time I am? Then I need to kind of compartmentalize, and I need to think of something as a book. I need to get the heart of it, the idea of it, completely through first. And maybe I have concepts like a song goes here, a song goes here, but I'm not really like paying too much attention to that. When I've gotten all of that out, I then will go back and be like, okay, yeah, I feel that. And I can also look at dialogue and be like, actually, this dialogue could be turned into a solo song, or it could be turned into a duet song. So once I have my outline and I've built in some dialogue, I then have a better view of where we're going. If I was collaborating with someone, for example, the show that I just did with the Kennedy Center, I was just the composer. I used Elizabeth Acevedo's lyrics, poems as lyrics, and I had a playwright, and we all had to work in tandem to make sure, like, does this sit well? Is it justified that we're going into a song right now in this moment? There has to be like a little bit of a back and forth. I would sometimes ask the playwright, like, okay, but tell me why, like, give me, like, why are we breaking out into song right now? Or like, explain to me what happened in this moment, because I want to make sure I underscore it right. So that process is a little different than when I'm just the only book lyricist and composer. But then there are also moments where I'm just the lyricist and I'm working with a composer that like doesn't want me to lay down melody, just wants me to come up with words. And so it's super helpful that I think in this sort of poetic language and then have this sort of justification, like, well, this is why in the song she's feeling these things. So she needs to get to the end because she's experiencing X, Y, and Z within this song. And sometimes a song can actually replace like what you thought would be the meat of a scene. A song can actually replace that in a musical, because if it's the meat, it's the heightened center. And that is usually why we break out into song, because we are feeling so much. We are at the peak.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
I have a question, and this is the first time for me, but when I wrote this scene, I was seeing music, hearing music with the scene, which is not and then at one point in my scene, getting out of the car, I could see myself breaking out, or the person breaking out in a song. So those two elements can work together is my question.
Those two elements can definitely work together. Start seeing it. Don't feel like you have to stop your flow of like outlining or getting your idea to write that song, but just make a note in there.
Okay, thank you. This is exciting, by the way.
Good. Okay, so part 3, you're gonna write a poem. You can break your poem up into verse. I gave us the formula for an art song here. So it'll go verse. The first verse is the argument, like why are we here? Why are we singing? The passing chorus is an action. I have to do this thing. Maybe it's the first realization of that action. The next verse is the thesis, or like, okay, we're having this argument because, right? Or I have this position because. And then the bridge is like, well, because you have this position and because you need to go to this place, this is what's going to happen. And then you can always end. And that's why I showed you that Into the Woods theme from our pre-worksheet. If you want to listen to it, you can actually always end in another verse, which is like how the resulting action fits in with the thesis of the show. So how this song ties into your overall idea can always be the ending verse. I noted that an art song leads more towards poetry with some meter and set to accompanying music, but it would be really similar to this as well. And because we're kind of coming at it from an art song point of view, I think it'll work out perfect. And an example,
Question on the song poetic lyric structure.
Mhm.
Where would the chorus go?
Here, passing chorus can go here. And then you can always end on a chorus again or a verse.
Got it. Yep.
And so this is kind of my like rough, when I taught this workshop in February, this was kind of a rough on the fly poem that I wrote, which is true love can always find me. I was lost in the forest. Now I'm found in your arms. You are there when I need you. I looked up in the forest and there were your arms. And then I have a back and forth because I was trying to also talk about how you can pull dialogue into a song. I walked into true love. I did the impossible. Your arms are all I need. This is so cliche. You just happen to be there. Wow. Yes. I love a little sneaky last liner too. So it can be that simple, right? Like start with the poem and then fit it into this space. Notice there's repetition. I looked up in the forest. I was lost in the forest. In your arms. I'm not doing any crazy rhymes here. I leave you hanging for a rhyme, right? You are there when I need you. And then we go back to our forest arms. And that you really has no space in there, but it's coupling itself. You were there when I needed you. They couple, they false rhyme in that way. So you have the ability to play with sound in any of those ways. Any questions? What was that?
If you can put in the chat box any helpful resources or link, or when Angie does any follow-up, with those of us who signed up for the workshop this morning. So it would be helpful to know, if there's any resources, or like, next time you, let's say, conduct a workshop, that way we know.
Yeah. Did you get that PDF that I put in the chat?
I believe I downloaded it and it went through.
Because
I think I saved it on the computer. I think it went through. Yep.
Good, because it has a link to a rhyming website, and it also has those sort of like resources in it as well. If you find you're hungering for like a specific resource, could be like a lyric writing resource, just email me. I'll make sure, I'll put my email in the chat now so that I can.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Thank you so much. Yeah, because I'm super rusty. It's literally been like decades. And when I had a dictionary, it was like an old school rhyming dictionary, you know, like the physical, nothing online.
Mhm.
Been a long time.
I like this rhyming dictionary because it's super, you just put in the word and it's like, all right, these are things that end that sound.
Thank you so much.
Banana, jamma, grandma, gamma, pajama, Alabama. It just gets fun. I find this one fun because you can make a song out of the things that you're like looking up from there alone. Okay, I'm gonna start our timer.
Hi, Jay.
Yes.
Hi, may I see, may you please leave the sample of the poem? That would help me a lot. Thanks so much.
Yes. You've got a little less than 40 seconds. It's time. Okay. I want to honor that it is 12:30 right now. There's one more thing that I wanted to introduce to you. So if you can stay on, great. If not, this is being recorded and I'll just go through the motions of it. And then you can get access to it on your own. So I'm going to hold that space. I put my email in the chat too, in case you, thank you, Gloria, wanted to reach out at another time with more questions. I'm around. I also do I do a 3-hour version of this course once every other month. And there also is like a 8-part class of this where we actually spend 2 classes together doing book building, dialogue building exercises, 2 classes together doing lyric building exercises, 2 classes together doing music creating exercises and just finding our instruments. And then our last class, we kind of think about then how we put them all together, which you'll see in my kind of how do you move on next page. And then we all build decks, because in those 2 classes, you come up with music, you come up with lyrics. So you build sort of an intro deck for collaborators or early on production. So
where do we sign up? Where do we sign up?
I definitely email me or make sure I get your email and I'll send you out the signups.
All right, you got me.
Yay. Okay, so thank you for your time. Thank you for people who could stay. I really appreciate it. One thing that I think is really important when we talk about musicals is the making of music. And I think there's this big gate in front of accessing music because we think about that we need to have 20 years of playing the piano or 18 years of playing the guitar. We need to know all these fancy technologies. And composing a musical is actually not about that. Composing a musical is about having a musical idea in your head, a sound, a concept, a theme, a tone, an idea, and seeing how that can track through. And then it's finding the people, the sound designer, the copyist, the transcriber, the orchestrator, the music director that can help that be realized into all the technology and the instruments and the ways that happens. But the composer is really just the person who has the idea. The same way that the book writer is the person that has the idea and then writes out this book. The composer has this idea and then facilitates however way they need to, a way to get that idea made. So some accessibility pitfalls that I see that I feel are find your tool, the tool that works for you. If it's Logic, if it's GarageBand, I compose on a bigger one, but if I need to travel, I have this little travel MIDI keyboard. And it's frustrating if you want to do big things, but it's great if you want to just plunk out one hand or make some quick edits. And then I use the tool that gives me the best representation, right? So whatever I need, and I see things are coming in the chat, I'm going to look at them. Whatever I need to best give an interpretation of what I'm trying to get, I make it. For example, for the show that I just did with the Kennedy Center, I wanted live beats. I wanted people to be making beats on stage, and they couldn't really understand the concept. So I made an entire demo where I read out all the lines and I sang all the songs and I played the beats underneath it. And then they were like, oh, okay, I get it. So it wasn't beautiful, right? This was a rough demo that I made very late at night in between a million other things that I had going on, but it gave the best representation for people to buy in and be like, oh, okay, I know who you need to work with to make that happen. And Do you know who to work with to make this happen? And it just sounds like these parts. So composer is a dreamer just as much as any other part. And then find someone who knows how to use their tool with ease that you want to collaborate with. There are many people who know how to use many tools. I know how to use many different editing softwares, but the one that I work with in ease is, that's a great question. What's my Logic Pro at 10 or Logic Pro X is the one that I move with in ease. And even GarageBand, which is like the simpler version of Logic, I sometimes feel is a little clunky because I'm so used to Logic. So if someone asked me to make something in Adobe Suite, I'd be like, I'm not your person. But if you're looking to make this in Logic, I can be your person. Okay, I'm gonna look at the chat. Ooh, thank you. Yeah, the thought of, it can be really intimidating, but have an idea. So this is the last part. We don't have to stay on to do it together, but I made these 3 different samples. My dog is like, okay, it's us time. I made these 3 different sample beats. I'm gonna put them in the chat. Phoenix, that's my dog's name. And you can see, or maybe you want to do it on your own and just use whatever you have for yourself, but you can see if you can lay down. Okay, file is blocked for security reasons, but I know a way around it. Go to my file. This is my very unorganized, organized life. I made a folder for mapping out your musical. There we go. I'm like, where am I going? And then here. Okay, so I'm gonna upload the tracks that I made. And these are just like samples, so they're not like full ideas, but they should give you some sort of a reference to work with or to say, I don't want to work with that. One of them is called Bouncy Up Tempo. There's Power Ballad.
Now you have the black square covering everything again.
Oh no. Okay.
Guys, you have to say something because she's showing stuff and you can't see it.
Power Ballad sounds like this. And then tango up tempo sounds like this. So I also made some of them funky, so really take a full listen to it. So I want to give it some shape.
This is your own compositions?
Yeah, but they're like, I built them from Logic and I sampled like that bass that you hear is a sample of a loop in Logic.
They're so warm and oh my God, they're beautiful. They're warm and rich. I love them. Thank you for sharing those.
You're welcome, and play with them. I'm gonna give you the link to this folder in the chat so that you can access them that way.
Angie, do we have access to the chat as well? I'm sorry, did I ask this last Sunday? Do we have access to the chat as well as to the videos or no?
There's nowhere to post these chats.
Okay.
We post the video, but if you need anything from the chat, the best time to go through it is while you're
right now
on it.
Mm-hmm. I can also save the chat from my end and I'll email it to whomever is interested.
All right, yes, I am. Thank you so much. Very kind of you.
Okay, so that would be the last step of like today. And then after that, oh, and the note that I gave for this is it doesn't need to be perfect, right? We need to build up the muscle of what it's like to lay down lyrics on beats and or decide that that's not the muscle that we want to build and that's not for us. But aiming for, I just want to get something done. I want to get it out. I want to get a feel for it is the best method when you're first starting. And then later you can come back and sort of be perfectionist. And so then I would say that we wrap on how you'd keep going, right? Like if you did all of these 3 sequences for one moment, you would place that in your outline or your scene. And then you decide if you want to move chronologically, like keep going forward from that moment, or if you want to just work in scenes and moments still, and then look at that. And then also continue to engage in the conversation. Do you want a collaborator? Do I want to do this by myself? Do I want somebody else around? And that works both ways. Like, do I want to have to communicate, to have to compromise and engage in collaborative conversation, which is beautiful and healthy? Or do I just want to make all the calls for this thing myself, which is also beautiful and healthy?
Also, I just want to say, what if in my case, like I know I have to collaborate, I need a collaborator because I am musically not trained, I am so ignorant in that realm, so I know I need a collaborator.
If you know you need a collaborator, make what you have into that, whatever you have available, make into a deck. And then the Dramatist Guild has this thing. You can see my screen still, yes?
Yes, we can. I can.
Good, good.
Yeah.
Okay, so here under members, you go to find a collaborator. And then these are people looking to collaborate on a project. And you can see like someone's looking for a composer lyricist, or someone is a composer lyricist and they're seeking a librettist. This is a playwright seeking a director. And you can reach out to people this way and you send them that little, whatever version of a deck you have, a manuscript or a treatment, so that they have something to reference.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Any more questions? I'm gonna stop screen sharing.
This is amazing. Just blows my mind.
Yeah, thank you.
I can second that. So amazing. Thank you so much. This is like top-notch, exquisite.
I will
Thanks.
third this.
Thank you. Yeah, I hope to, I'll email anyone who says that they want to know more about the workshops. I'll send you an email. And I also, you have my email, so if you have questions, just send me one.
Did everyone send you their email? Maybe you guys want to post it in the chat so she could grab it, or
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, I
guys.
think I sent mine.
Mhm.
you sent it before, but this is for different. If you want more info, send her your email so she could be in contact. So is everybody walking away with knowing where to start?
Oh yeah.
Oh, Robert, I know, Roberto, I know your head was turning, like.
No, like this is like so new to me, like musical, it's a whole different monster. It's like, this is such an amazing exercise. It's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm on the other side. Like I can write songs, but I need, I need a collaborative in terms of the scene part, in terms of the screenwriting.
Hey, you could work together.
Right?
Yes.
So
Okay,
who
super.
here could do that? You guys need to, one of you is gonna have to create a group and work with each other and help each other
I
out.
mean, I can write songs all day long, and because I write poems literally all day long.
Do you know, are you by,
When I'm not like doing my real paid job, which is running my real estate business.
Jasmine, I see your last name is Ortiz. Do you also speak Spanish?
Yes, yes.
Let's hook up, because my story, I wanted to be bilingual in the sense, one in
Okay.
Spanish
Okay.
and in English, the version in Spanish and in English.
Okay,
So-
yeah, you do tertulias? Is that what you do? A lot of tertulias, you know, reading?
Actually, I am working on a couple of plays, straight on plays, you know, and then I'm actually working on a musical idea that
I
I'm.
think is the Hispanic repertoire theater still in
El repertorio español.
yeah, in New
It
York?
is. They
still
have
active?
amazing
Okay.
productions. They have amazing
yeah,
productions.
'cause
I just
know
saw El Quijote.
Okay, yeah,
Uh,
because I know that, yeah, that's a classic. They do a lot. Yeah, because I know they're usually the main hub for Spanish musical theater. Mhm.
You know what I would like to think about, Janelle, and think about this is, you know, when I think about my life, I grew up in California, Chicana, and grew up low riding in the Mission and Starring King. So there's a soundtrack to my life. You know, and
That's
I would
deep.
like, there's a soundtrack to
That's
my
deep.
life, but to also think about that soundtrack, but also being able to sing about, I mean, that's some dope shit. Thank you. You got me
Mhm,
thinking differently.
Yeah.
mhm.
My musical Wet, the one that's a little unconventional, is because all of the main characters, the main actors don't sing. It's the background people who sing because they're creating a playlist of the vibe. And people are like, but I don't get it. That's kind of like a film. And I'm like, but it's beautiful to watch it live. Like, wouldn't that be great? So dream, know the form, know what people are looking for. They're looking for how do people know when to clap? Don't clap. You know not to clap and other things. So like know what people are like, why they're asking for buttons, why they're asking for things to have a certain formula, to be like, actually, that's why I didn't want that. I want it because of this. I want this because of this.
Quick question, only if possible. I come from a lot of insecurity about writing plays and stuff like that, because it means so much to me, musical. Do we have a couple of minutes where I could share my idea, or no?
Yeah.
We do? Okay.
Is everyone okay with that?
Sure.
Is it?
Oh,
Fine.
the diehards, so other people left. We still think in here.
We are the diehards.
Yeah, we should definitely